Today's film is a drama action from 2016 titled, The Girl with All the Gifts. Melanie lies on her bed, counting the number of breaths she can take. While counting, she hears Sergeant Parks knocking on the doors and ordering everyone to get ready for transit. Two soldiers enter her cell and tie her to a wheelchair before wheeling her to the classroom, where several other children are also tied to wheelchairs. A substitute teacher named Selkirk poses difficult questions about the periodic table to Melanie's class, which the students are unable to answer. The children are overjoyed when their regular instructor Helen arrives. Helen informs the substitute teacher that her class has not thoroughly covered the periodic table. She is about to begin her lesson when Melanie requests that she tell them a story, to which all of the other children agree. But Helen is concerned that the administration would object, so Melanie asks her to tell them about Greek mythology, which will be a part of their history course. Helen likes Melanie's idea and starts telling them about Greek mythology and Pandora's box. After a while, their class time is over, and the soldiers take the children to their quarters. The children are later given a plate of worms to eat, which they eagerly accept. Melanie eats and falls asleep but soon wakes up and begins counting again. Melanie is awakened by the sound of Dr. Caroline's footsteps as she visits the children. Melanie greets the doctor who is collecting responses from the children, and when the doctor realizes Melanie has already solved the previous puzzle, she assigns her another one. She tells Melanie that a cat is inside the box, and Melanie must find out whether it's alive or dead without touching it or looking inside. The doctor then asks Melanie to pick a number between 1 and 20, and she chooses 13. The following day, when the students are gathered in a line to take them to their class, Melanie notices that Kenny's room number 13 is closed, and she is not with the other children. Noticing Kenny's seat empty in the classroom, Melanie becomes worried and has difficulty concentrating on her lesson, so she asks Helen about Kenny's absence. Helen dismisses her inquiry and attempts to change the class environment by encouraging the kids to write their own stories. After a while, she asks if anyone would like to share their story with the class, and Melanie offers to read hers. Helen gets moved as she listens to Melanie's story and pats her on the head. Sergeant Parks, who is watching them, storms in yelling at Helen for breaking the rules and reminds her why they are not allowed to touch the children directly. He spits on his arm, rubbing off the blocking gel, and holds it under the nose of one of the children, evoking a violent animalistic response from the child that spreads to the others on that side of the room. Sergeant Parks takes out his blocking gel and rubs it on his skin, and all of the children return to normal. He cautions Helen to keep in mind that although the kids appear to be human, they are not. The soldiers take all the children back to their rooms while Sergeant Parks accompanies Melanie. As punishment, Parks leaves Melanie restrained in her wheelchair in her cell, not allowing her to sleep in her bed. Later, when Helen visits Melanie, she discovers that Melanie is still strapped to her wheelchair, so she opens her door and tries to free her. Melanie realizes Helen's scent blocker isn't working because she can smell her. She reacts by snapping and attempting to bite Helen. Melanie resists and urges Helen to leave immediately, knowing she won't be able to control herself for long. Helen rushes outside and apologizes to Melanie for putting her in this situation. Later, during her routine rounds, Dr. Caroline notices a tube of blocking gel at Melanie's door and asks who came to see her. Melanie does not give her a name, so the doctor asks her to choose a number again, but before she can complete the question, Helen answers 4, surprising Caroline. She asks Helen if she is sure, to which Melanie answers yes, as this is her room number. The next day, the children are taken to class while Sergeant Parks comes to transfer Melanie somewhere else. As Melanie is led outside, she observes soldiers battling creatures that resemble zombies and struggling to keep them outside the walls. Melanie is led to the laboratory, where she encounters Dr. Caroline and her assistant Selkirk. She sees a brain inside a jar labeled 13 and inquires of the doctor about the solution to the riddle given to her earlier. Caroline responds that, like Melanie, the cat is neither dead nor alive. Melanie is then sedated by the doctor's assistant and strapped onto the operating table. Helen, however, bursts in with a fire extinguisher and tries to stop them before they can begin her operation. She breaks the phone, preventing the doctor from calling security, and demands that they stop killing the children. The doctor tells Helen these are not ordinary children and requests that she lay down her weapon. Dr. Caroline tricks her into dropping the fire extinguisher and then uses pepper spray to incapacitate her. Her assistant contacts security, who rush to the scene but are hesitant to take her away as they're focused on keeping the infected people outside. Dr. Caroline informs them that Helen is now their responsibility, as they depart with her. Suddenly, sirens sound, indicating that the military base has been breached. Dr. Caroline is adamant about continuing with the experiment and instructs her assistant to lower the shutter. Selkirk attempts to close the window shutter, but the infected humans known as Hungries smash through and bite her. Dr. Caroline kills the infected people, but her hands get injured during this process. Selkirk begins pursuing the doctor after becoming infected by one of the attackers who bit her. Caroline quickly exits the room, leaving Melanie still bound to the bed. Melanie is not attacked by the Hungries because they can tell she is one of them. After some struggle, Melanie breaks free from her straps and runs outside, discovering some soldiers assaulting Helen. She dashes in their direction and violently attacks and infects the soldiers who are trying to restrain Helen. Melanie becomes disoriented as she lies on the ground after feeding on the soldiers. Helen awakens and realizes what has just occurred, so she picks up Melanie and looks around for a way out. Sergeant Parks drives up in his military truck and instructs Helen to get in. Helen brings Melanie inside, where she discovers Dr. Caroline is also present. When they stop to rest, Sergeant is surprised to see Melanie and draws his gun at her, while Helen shields her and instructs her to get out and run into the fields. Sergeant Parks directs the soldier to send their coordinates to the military's main base for a search and rescue. However, their truck is unable to get a signal. The doctor and Helen persuade the sergeant to let Melanie travel with them, so he restrains her hands and face and forces her to sit on top of the truck, where she cannot harm anyone. After traveling for a while, the group stops to collect water. Sergeant Parks instructs the soldiers to use suppressors on their firearms to reduce noise. Using special bullets, they are able to minimize blood splatter, thereby reducing the risk of infection. One of the soldiers forgets to attach his suppressor and fires in the bushes, attracting all of the nearby Hungries. Dr. Caroline and Helen rush back to the truck while the soldiers fight the Hungries. While the soldiers attempt to eliminate their opponents, one becomes infected, and Sergeant Parks executes him before they flee the scene. During this fight, a stray bullet accidentally hits the petrol tank, forcing them to travel on foot. They all put blockers on their skins before moving cautiously toward the base, passing several Hungries along the way. Dr. Caroline's curiosity gets the best of her when she witnesses one of them acting like a mother. They are forced to flee, and the sergeant is furious with her for putting them all in danger. She apologizes, and the sergeant orders everyone in the ward to look around and report. Melanie, on the other hand, stays with Dr. Caroline, who is still in pain from her previous injuries. When Melanie questions her identity, the doctor explains that Sergeant Parks and other soldiers traveled to cities to rescue survivors after the fungus infected the world. When they arrived at a maternity hospital, they discovered some newborns who had eaten their way out of their infected mother's womb. These infants got the virus from their mothers through the placenta. Unlike other Hungries who are unable to think or speak, these were able to do both, giving the doctor hope that she can develop a treatment for all other Hungries using the DNA of these hybrids. Melanie tells the doctor that she does not want to be a Hungry, but Dr. Caroline asserts that she is, and she cannot change it. Helen returns with new clothes for Melanie, but she was unable to find food for her. Melanie spends the night chatting with the soldiers, and they end up becoming friends. When they wake up the next day, they discover that Hungries have surrounded the entire area and they can't leave. Melanie volunteers to act as bait, diverting the Hungries' attention away from there, and after some hesitation the sergeant and the others allow her. Melanie gets ready and heads outside to explore the city. She hunts and eats a stray cat and continues looking for more animals and soon finds a dog and takes it near the Hungries, who smell the dog and begin chasing it. Once the streets are clear, Sergeant Parks restrains her again and muzzles her face after appreciating her help. Melanie offers to assist them once more, by checking which path has the fewest Hungries. Later, while walking, they see a massive fungal growth wrapped like a tall tower, similar to vines growing from piles of dried leaves. The doctor explains that Hungries assemble in one place and transform into a forest-like tree. This is the next stage of their life cycle, and if the pods open, they will release airborne fungus spores, infecting everyone. The group continues their journey and soon comes across an abandoned mobile laboratory created by Dr. Caroline and her colleagues. They enter the laboratory, but there is no food inside. Sergeant Parks successfully attempts to contact the base again, and he finds out that the situation is not good on their side either. Since they are short on food, one of the soldiers volunteers to go search for food outside. Melanie informs them that she must go out and eat as well, as she is starting to smell everyone, and she won't be able to resist for long. Melanie hunts a bird and comes across a group of hybrids who have picked up the scent of the soldier looking for food. She returns to the laboratory to inform the others, and the group immediately sets out to find and save their colleague. The soldier walked right into a trap that the hybrids had set for him, luring him with cans of food. As Melanie and her friends discover him, he is already dead, and hybrids surround them. Melanie requests that Helen and Sergeant Parks stay away while she fights the hybrids' boss and becomes their new leader. She threatens them, claiming that the people with her are her property and that she will not allow them to eat her prey. When they return to the lab, they are ambushed and knocked out by gas that Dr. Caroline has released. Caroline's wound has developed into a blood infection and she is now dying. She wants to try one last time and perform the experiment using Melanie's brain. However, the doctor's plan fails as Melanie uses the fungus in her brain to metabolize oxygen, and thus she can stay without oxygen for an extended period. Dr. Caroline tries to persuade Melanie to let her perform the surgery because it will save everyone's life, but Melanie realizes that her life is also very valuable, so why should she make a sacrifice? Melanie believes that her species is the future of humanity. She rushes out, and when the doctor follows her, she is killed by the hybrids. Melanie then walks to the massive fungus tree and lights it on fire, releasing all the spores. Sergeant Parks arrives and inquires as to what transpired, to which she replies that she unlocked the pods. Melanie reluctantly grants the sergeant's request to kill him because he does not want to be infected by the virus. The film concludes with Helen waking up, safe from infection in the airlock but practically a prisoner inside. Outside gathered are the children from the army base's prison school as well as the wild hybrids, who are all waiting and gathered together, firmly held in place by Melanie. Helen begins speaking through a microphone on outside speakers to educate and teach all of the children once more. Melanie asks for her favorite, a story. After Helen politely declines, she states that they now have plenty of time to hear one. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe to support the channel.